Hello and welcome to the Fairbanks Year-Round podcast. I am today joined by Haley Evans, who is the owner and nurse practitioner of Alpine Medical Group. Did I get it all?
That's
okay,
it.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
And of course, I'm Blake Schreckheis with the Summit Realty Group, ready to sell real estate whenever. But let's get into you first. I always like to start with how you made it to Fairbanks, how you made it to Alaska, and kind of what your history is in the area.
Yeah, well, I am born and raised Fairbanksan.
Oh, yeah.
I actually come from a long line of Alaskans. My grandparents homesteaded here in the 50s out off of Badger Road.
That's awesome.
So, yeah, he was one of the first chiropractors, my grandpa, in Fairbanks.
Okay.
So, yeah, they came up in the 50s, homesteaded.
So explain what homesteading looks like. So homesteading was pretty much done throughout the country, of course, when we were moving west further and further. I would assume that Alaska has the latest instances of that happening, like the 50s and even beyond that. So what did that look like
For them?
Yeah.
So when they came up, they came with very little. They drove up the Alcan with whatever they could fit in their vehicle. My grandpa specifically, he came up and purchased a chiropractic clinic, and which was the first chiropractic clinic in Fairbanks. So homesteading for them, they had a property off of Badger Road. It's now subdivided to Dennis Road, Linda. I think there's a Linda Road named after all of his kids.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah,
okay.
so
I drive by that all the time.
Yeah,
so I'm going to take note.
Yep, that's the area. So they homesteading essentially. They had the piece of property. My grandpa had a small cabin out there, no running water, living through the cold winters. And they had animals, they had horses, dogs, cats. I remember my mom saying that, she grew up with 15 plus cats in their house. So it was a very austere environment.
Yeah.
So
I think homesteading then was what people think we do now here that have never been to the area. And not that it doesn't happen here anymore, but it is way less common. So it is funny to hear you talk about off Badger Road. If you're not familiar with the North Pole area in Badger Road, it's like just neighborhood central there, all up and down. It's houses, maybe 1 acre lots almost exclusively now. So to hear where it started, and that's not that long ago.
No. And at that time, Badger Road was way, way out there. And and now Badger Road, everybody, tons of people live there, and it's relatively close, to what our standards are now. But at that time, it was very remote. And my grandma spent a lot of time just trying to keep things together.
Yeah, that's all. No, just having a house. I tell people, especially in Alaska, having a house is almost a full-time job. The fuel and the maintenance and things that go wrong, and then summer comes along and you want to do a bunch of fun stuff, but then you're doing a bunch of maintenance items as well.
Yep.
So I did want to back up to the Alcan, which is the Alaskan Canada highway that connects us to the lower 48. If you come up it now, people still talk about it as quite the adventure, but realistically, it's not that bad of a road, especially in the summertime. However,
not
in
anymore.
the 50s, and again, I wasn't around then, but my understanding is it was pretty terrible. There was no pavement. You were going through flat after flat. So
right, and I of course wasn't around at that time either. So I imagine it was a rough go.
Yeah.
Even now, I remember driving the Alcan, in my 20s and 30s, and there was a fair amount of construction, the majority of the way.
Always.
So it's all this, this constant upkeep of the road. So
it's really, it's just harsh on roads, the climate, of course, but there's always construction and there's always miles of construction. So you're never going to have the whole thing paved up here. I mean, maybe if they make some, I don't know, I guess if we get a ton of population there, which seems unlikely. But I have a distinct memory of when we came up. It would have been early 2000s, I assume. I was still a kid. And you kind of travel with people just by, there's only one road. So you kind of see the same campers and the same cars and trailers as you're driving up if you're moving up. And we all kind of got in a line at one point behind somebody, and there's probably we'll say 7 different vehicles. And the frost heaves is basically where the pavement gets pushed up into these little mounds. They could be sharp, they could be a little more rounded, but they're pretty hard on your suspension. So you got to go kind of slow. Well, somebody at the back of the line just got fed up and just had a huge motorhome. and just gassed it around all of us, probably going, I'm assuming like 70, 80. And I still like visually remember the suspension just like bending down because they were coming so high. They're just like, bam. And, you know, once you've committed, especially it's probably some irritated dad, this is what I'm visualizing. It's like, I'm going now. And the kids and the plates, everything are rattling back there.
Yeah. In the back flying around.
Yeah. So that's the nice Alcan that we have today. But I know my grandpa came up in the 70s, I guess. And yeah, he's told me many, many stories, but the one that sticks with me is 17 flats in one trip, 17 flats, and just having to keep repairing tires. And it was a different world back then.
Yeah, I can't even imagine how tough that trip would have been. It's tough now. Yeah. It's just a long stretch of road with not a lot in between your stops. So it's
the idea of like not pretty much anywhere in the modern world. If something happens to you, you're so close to help to getting a tire patched or whatever, like all those things. And I think Alaska still does offer that seclusion where you're not always sure. And that's still true in the Alcan. We came up most recently in the winter, and so it was 20 below. And there was a lot of concern. We had kids, and we're like, well, what if we do break down or if an accident happens? So there's definitely still some danger if that's what you're looking for.
Yeah. I think it appeals to a lot of people.
Yeah.
You know, we're off the beaten path, and we're not overpopulated like, you know, so much of the country is.
Yeah.
I think people are really craving that.
So you've had multiple generations here. I assume, as most people, did you move away at any point? Or were you...
I did. I had moved away several times, you know, and like growing up and especially in high school, you know, that I think it's probably pretty typical mindset of, I'm going to leave my hometown and never come back kind of thing. You know, there's that itch to go find something else and explore. So definitely left, did all my education outside of Alaska. So I had that experience of living in larger communities and, you know, but there's something special about Fairbanks that I think that it's easy to take for granted when you're here all the time. But then if you leave and you come back, you realize really how special it is to be in a community where people care about each other. And, you know, we have there's so much opportunity here for outdoor recreation and really having more of a simplistic life, where you're not caught up in the day-to-day and the drudgery of highways and, you know, kind of that fast-paced environment and lots of pavement. We're really fortunate to have.
So when you moved back the most recent time, this is always curious to me, was it with the intention of like, hey, this is my now place that I'm going to stay?
Yes.
Or was it, okay.
Yep, it was. Yep. And then right before I moved back, I was in Dallas, and I knew for certain that was not the place for me.
Yeah.
It's big and hot and, you know, dirty, and I really mountains. That was something that was a big flat. Yeah.
We did a trip down there. So I've lived in Arkansas a lot. Most of my family's down there. And our last time living there, we did a trip to Dallas, not in like any intention of living there or anything, but we're there for a week. And I have never been so stressed in my life.
Yeah.
The traffic, which I'm just not a big traffic guy, but I've driven in other cities and been okay. But Dallas is like something. It's like an hour away. You're in traffic, and
it's never ending.
And it's fast too. So it's not like where you're stopped downtown and you're going creeping along, which sucks in its own way. It's like everyone's going 70. There's 18 lanes. It feels like, you know, and I'm just a small country boy.
No, it's too much. It's way too much.
I had to take my straw hat off.
Yeah. No. Way too much. And it really just like accelerates or increases that stress level when you're dealing with that day in, day out.
Yeah.
So, and then, when I came back, I was
like you can
certain
breathe
at that point. Yeah. It's like a sigh of relief and like a weight's been lifted to see all of the trees and, you know, not be battling traffic. And
I'm sure you get used to it in a certain way as well. But there is this, like, even when we Alaskans or Fairbanksians go on vacation and come back, at least for me, that sigh of relief where there's like this extra tension in your life that just totally goes away when it's just being in a slower area, probably more than anything. And you just know where you're going and don't have to put stuff in maps, you know, all
absolutely. And I really feel like the community too, you know, the people of Fairbanks are just, it's hard to recreate a community like we have. You know, I feel like people are friendly and go out of their way to help one another. And, you know, we're fortunate in that way. I think that's hard to find.
So I want to move into how you became a nurse and Alpine and all that, but I always have to point out there's two occupations that personally, I'm not throwing any judgment. I want everyone to know, but personally, I think you must be a little bit crazy to want to do. And one is being a teacher, which a lot of people want that.
Yeah.
And the second is being a nurse. And there's like a variety of like nursing, like your day looks very different from one nurse to the next. I know. But
yeah, it's all kind of the same.
There's
it's
a lot of like kind of gross stuff in there that, you know, I don't know if we want to talk about it, but so what kind of drove you towards, was it something you always knew you were going to do?
Yeah. I knew from the time I was a small child that I wanted to be in a healthcare profession where I was helping people. And actually when I was, I don't know, I must have been 8 or 9, third grade time frame, I really thought that I wanted to be a pediatrician. And then, you know, getting older and being exposed to more things and kids. Yeah. I realized that was probably not what I wanted to do. But I've always known that I wanted to be in healthcare in some capacity. I love people. I like taking care of people. And I started initially, when I was in college, actually getting my undergrad, I had done a summer training to do massage therapy, which I thought was important to make sure that I wanted to touch people. It kind of is an introduction to making sure that, I really do want to help people.
We should look at rephrasing that, the touching people thing. Because nowadays, no, I'm joking.
Funny.
Turns out she does like to touch people.
Blake.
No, my dad's actually a massage therapist. Yeah, it was really cool. It was, as an older man and I'm being his son, I'm like, you know, when he started, and he's someone who doesn't really care what people think, which is great. I'm like, Dad, what are you doing?
Yeah.
And anyways, he has like a whole healing center and stuff that he
very cool.
Yeah, it seems to really enjoy it.
Here in Fairbanks?
No, this one's down in Arkansas actually as well. Yeah, so we have like a split. A lot of my family came up. A lot of my family are preachers, so they would, you know, like the missionary works and stuff. So they came up to Alaska, which was like basically a different country. Yeah. And so that's how we got up here basically. But yeah, Arkansas is the other end of it. But
great.
Enough about me. So you knew you were wanting this very early on, which is really cool, by the way, because I think the majority of people, especially there's a lot of pressure now, I think, during high school and college to find not only your occupation in the last, we'll say 20 years, your passion has been a very big word that's been thrown around, which I have mixed feelings on. Yeah. But to know it pretty early is wonderful. So you, right out of high school, you just kind of drove right towards it. Perfect. Yeah. And so you get your education done, and let's bridge between then until Alpine. Doesn't seem like opening your own practice is, I mean, it obviously happens, but it's got to be the minority of people. So what brought you to that?
Well, so a few things. I, throughout my education, schooling, training, I really saw where the breakdowns were in healthcare. It became very, very apparent, very clear that, you know, these systems are in place. They're not working very well. Patients aren't very happy. Providers are really burnt out. It became clear that, you know, there was a problem with the way our healthcare system, and it's probably this way all over the country, but, you know, I know that from Fairbanks, having gone through training and clinicals here, that I just saw that there was a need that needed to be filled, which was high quality care that takes care of both patient and provider. You know, provider burnout is a very real thing. And when providers are burnt out, patients aren't getting the best care.
And is that just from overwork? What do you see?
It's just from overwork. So pretty typical, you know, medical care is, you know, you call your provider, you're scheduled, you know, maybe 3 months out. You get to your appointment, you see your provider for 10 to 15 minutes, and then you're on your way. And there's very little follow through. There's very little communication and relationship development between patient and provider. Patients feel like they're a number and they're just pushed through, and they don't have that relationship, or there's no time to build that relationship because it's such a high volume, demanding situation for providers and for clinics. And so my goal was to really, have a counterbalance to that and have a place where we can schedule 30-minute appointments or 45-minute appointments. And, the provider has the time to do a deep dive on this person's history and to get to know them and find out what their values are and their goals and, create that relationship, which ultimately helps, the patient, if you feel cared for, you're going to heal and you're going to get better. But it requires, you have to have that positivity with your care, to really get, in my opinion, to really have, a full healing process happen.
Yeah.
Whether you're dealing with a chronic disease or something more acute, if you feel cared for, the likelihood of getting better increases.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's wonderful.
Yeah.
So I have like all these questions swirling around. First, I want to say that, and I said this when I first called you to schedule the appointment, I was a little bit hesitant to do so. And the reason is in general, especially I think through COVID, there was an explosion of this, you might say, like a general distrust of healthcare that goes around. So Tina with FNH is the one who's like, hey, you should get Haley on here. Sorry, name totally went out of my head, but you should get Haley on here. As well as like, I don't know, what are we going to talk about kind of thing, but this is wonderful. So I think it's a good lesson for anybody. When you work at a job or you're a business owner, whatever it is, whatever field you're in, most people do notice things that don't feel quite right.
Yeah.
It's not just like these elite few that are like, hey, we notice this is wrong and we're going to fix it. Most people notice them, but very few people actually do something about it. So taking the steps to make things change is really tough. There's always pushback. You're going to do something different. It's like, no way. Like the old, was it the crabs or something that pull each other back down?
Yeah.
That analogy. So stepping out is tough. So when were you just like, I have to do this? And what did that look like? I guess business-wise, stress-wise, was it a big, huge, scary thing? Or what did that look like for you?
It wasn't terribly scary because I've been around business my whole life. And I've been around entrepreneurs my whole life. And so that business part of me wasn't scary. I felt like I had a lot of support. My dad has been in business and real estate for since I was very small. My grandpa was a business owner. My husband's a business owner. And so the business part to me was not a scary thing. I guess this might sound a little silly, but the hardest thing or the scariest thing is recruiting quality staff that you trust. That's by far the hardest thing. And that's one of the most important pieces of the business is having, those quality staff members that are, also care deeply about our patients and, want the practice to thrive.
Are you familiar with Charlie Leonelli? Do you know him?
I do know. Well, I know who he is. I don't know if I've met him.
Well, we just had him on, I guess it's been 2 weeks ago, but he's like the HR guy basically I think it's a different title. So sorry, Charlie. Well, that's nice. But for Mac Federal Credit Union. Yeah. And it was so funny. If you listen to that podcast, by the way, it'd be great. But when he left, Shelby was like, I think I want to go work for Charlie.
Oh.
I was like, I don't pay you enough. It's like, but I said, no, me too. I'm not looking for a job, but the way all the leadership stuff, anyways, it was really cool. But it is not silly. It's funny you say that. Like, it has got to be the number one problem, at least in Fairbanks. I think it's more general than that, is getting people that you want to be working with.
Yeah, absolutely.
There. So you were able to do that, it sounds like.
And we've been successful in that. Our team is absolutely phenomenal. If you read our Google reviews, there are multiple comments on, how great the front desk staff is, and the MAs are welcoming and warm and kind, and, there's relationship, there's time, and I think that's really, it all stems back to like having time and bandwidth to put into your people, and train them adequately and lift them up. And, if you don't have time in the day, you can't do all of those things.
Well, it comes from that. It used to be, I don't know what people say nowadays, but it was like starting with your why used to be like the big thing, but the seed of all business or anything, whatever the reason you're doing this item, begins to show in the rest of the business. So Your front desk staff is going to feel like a rushed mess, if everything in the back end is like, we got to go, we're just mowing through people or whatever it is. But if you have, again, and it's little things that people don't realize. It's when you walk in as the nurse owner and you say hello and have a short conversation or even a little longer conversation about Memorial Day weekend or something with your staff, puts off a very different vibe than like, hey, we got to get going today kind of thing. Or, so there's, so it's wonderful to hear. So staffing. How long's Alpine been around?
We opened in 2022. So it was September of 22.
Yeah, there you go. It's pretty recent. I didn't realize that.
Yeah, it's fairly recent. We just moved into the new building. It was December of 22. So
goodness.
Fairly new.
So you're still like in the starting phases. Do you feel that way?
Okay. Oh yeah. No, it hasn't really slowed down yet. We're still definitely, there's something we learn new every day, which is great.
I don't think that'll change.
It probably won't ever change.
I've only heard good things about you guys, by the way. And again, hadn't heard of you before. Sorry, I guess. But again, when Tina brought you up to me, then it was, kind of talking about you, of course, and then other people just organically how it goes. Like, Alpine. And we kept seeing like good reviews and things.
That's wonderful. Yeah. And that's really what we've strived for is to be a place where people want to come. Generally speaking, if people are coming into a provider, it's maybe not their best day, or they don't feel well, or, there's a lot of negativity, I think, that is surrounding, healthcare and going in for whatever it is, an annual exam.
Right.
There's a lot of stress and anxiety in that. And so my goal was to help alleviate.
So how do you balance that with what sounds like probably a huge need in the community, which means a good amount of clients. So how do you balance that time where you don't just become what you wanted to change and growing your practice, we'll say.
Right. Yeah, it's definitely it's something that we're still, it's every day, we're evaluating and, new patients coming in, and our number of providers and how much time we have. And it's definitely something that we keep an eye on. So that way we don't become, that practice where you can't get in for 3 months, So it's certainly something that we have to factor in on a daily basis and, adjust marketing and, adding new providers. That's another factor, with growth happening the way that it is. And it really shows how much of a need it was in the community. And as we're growing as fast as we are, we continue to add new providers. We just had a provider move up in May from Minnesota to add to our panel of offerings, and then expansion too. So that's certainly on the horizon.
Absolutely.
So to hopefully, we can continue to fill the need without turning into that maxed out organization.
Do you right now? Do you cap like clients that you have, or how do you?
We haven't started capping it yet.
Okay.
We're still taking new patients.
Wonderful.
As many as that call in. So we are still taking new patients, and then we're opening a second location this fall. So with that new location, I don't anticipate that we'll be cutting off new patients for some time.
Yeah. You're hiring, it sounds like still like continually hiring. Okay.
Yes,
so
we are.
All right, I'll keep that in mind.
Yeah, we are.
Yeah.
We're busy.
Are you just looking for providers? Are you looking for like, I hate to say like the back end, but like front desk, like
all the support staff.
Thank
you.
Yeah,
definitely. So, with the new location that we're opening this fall, we are going to need, front desk staff and, medical assistants are always something that we need.
I think I've brought this up a few times already. My sister, who now lives in Arkansas, I've been trying to get their family to move up, and the wage differences here are they're just big. Yeah. So I send her every now hiring sign. So I'm going to send her this podcast. And be like, hey, by the way,
does she have any medical experience?
She could.
No, we could train her.
Look, she could learn.
Yeah.
And I was talking to my brother-in-law, her husband, and I was like, yeah, what'd she think about that? And he's like, she's so frustrated. She's like, why does he keep sending me this stuff? Are we going to move up there? I was like, yeah, what do you think? You're going to move up here. Help you.
That's funny.
So we should talk about your services.
Yeah.
What's offered at Alpine?
So we have full spectrum care. We have 2 physicians. Dr. Bothwell, he does, primary care, but he also specializes in osteopathic manipulation. So he
Explain that.
it's a combination of joint adjustments and soft tissue work to help realign the body. Used often for chronic pain.
Is that different from chiropractic?
It is different.
Okay.
Yeah, chiropractic. I guess you could consider it to be similar. Osteopathic doctors, they go through medical school and residency. Chiropractors, they go to 4-year chiropractic school. So,
Gotcha.
and the training is a little bit different. Osteopathic physicians are trained a lot more in soft tissue work than chiropractors would be.
Okay. Gotcha.
So he specializes in osteopathic work, as well as primary care. He sees a lot of VA patients, which is great. He's retired military as well.
Shocker.
Yeah,
here
right.
in Fairbanks.
Right.
What's he doing here?
And then we have Dr. Trayball. He's also a DO physician, and he tends to see a lot of really complex chronic disease patients, and he's phenomenal at that. He's very thorough. He sees a pretty broad spectrum of patients. We have pediatrics. Sarah Evans is our pediatric nurse practitioner.
Relation there?
No relation. No, spelled differently.
Yeah.
But she sees peds, newborn to early adulthood. And then we have Mika Lockert. She's a nurse practitioner, and she specializes in hormones for both male and female.
Oh, wonderful.
So, yeah. So she's very busy with that.
That kind of strikes something that I've been thinking with testosterone in men. Like there's a lot of hormones that there's issues, but in particular, that seems to be like a big issue. I don't know how on that you are, but especially nowadays, it seems like over 30 or 40 years old, like low testosterone has become such a thing.
Yeah.
And it really affects
a lot. Like, it does affect it affects everything. Hormones are everything, men and women, both, and especially too with our lifestyle now where we're sedentary, our diets are usually not great. Men are meant to be outside doing heavy work. That's just how they're designed.
Yeah.
And our lifestyle now is not that,
That's why I think everyone should have a wood stove, even if you don't burn wood, just so you can chop and split, and give the wood away. I guess you don't need the stove for that.
Right. Just to have that physicality every day.
Yeah. It's a different feeling.
It's interesting to see, labs from younger men, 30s and 40s. That's a young man. They're a lot lower. The testosterone levels are a lot lower than they used to be. So, but it plays a role in everything.
I think people overestimate. I remember the story very distinctly. I think it was, I forget what it was, some podcast I listened to years ago. A guy, for whatever reason, his testosterone was basically zero. Again, I don't know all the medical stuff, what's realistic, but as low as it could get, I guess, for a human male. And he described his experience was like going to work. He would walk down the sidewalk, and he says, I was not driven to do anything. I didn't have an opinion of anything. Like he would see a butterfly and it would be like, that's a butterfly. It wasn't like, that's a pretty butterfly. He said it was so strange. You'd get home from work and he would literally stare at his wall until it was bedtime. He's like, it was very, just like this weird,
sad.
Like robotic.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then later, of course, he gets the levels figured out, and this is when they're interviewing him. He's like, I ascribed a lot of my, who I was to these things that just totally went away when one, and if you had it in a cup, like how much testosterone is in a human body, it's probably a very minuscule amount. He's like, this one little thing changed.
Yeah.
And it's like, I was always really driven. I was always all these things. And that just totally went away. So it kind of changed how he thought about himself, even. It's like how much of your personality is linked to these hormones.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, and depression, anxiety, which we most people struggle to some degree.
Especially here, too.
Yeah. I know it plays an absolutely huge role in everything.
Yeah.
Weight loss, weight, metabolism, mood, all of it, sleep, everything.
So I was doing a little bit of research. Sound like you, and there's again a lot of big words. I'm not a real smart man, but lean a lot towards pain management, or you did at least. Is that still?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And that's really the majority of my practice is pain management. I do prolotherapy, which is a type of regenerative medicine.
Okay.
We use dextrose, which is a sterile sugar water, and inject it to areas, usually joint tissue, that's dysfunctional and causing pain, and it regenerates regenerates joints.
Oh, wow.
So that's the majority of my practice. I do a lot of platelet-rich plasma, a lot of PRP, which is another type of regenerative medicine. It just takes that dextrose and it's like the next level above that.
And you're injecting that into like on-site?
Yep, on-site.
Okay.
Yeah. So people come in, usually they've got some diagnostic imaging done prior. I also use ultrasound in the clinic, so often we'll go based on that.
Right. You can tell the gender of the knee and stuff too when you're in there. Yeah.
Right. We have them draw their blood, same day right before the appointment. We process the platelets there in the clinic. So blood draw, process platelets, and then injection right after.
Okay.
But yeah, that's really the majority of my practice is chronic pain, regenerative medicine.
And is that, gosh, I watch a lot of strongman stuff, and I remember one in particular. I don't know if it was that same thing, but he tore his hamstring and had. I think that was the platelets used for like muscle stuff as well. Okay,
yep, you can. It's really you can use it. Joints is very common, and that's usually what people hear about PRP in relationship to. But chronic trigger points and things like that. Definitely.
So pain is an interesting thing. I'm young and I live generally pain free. I have little things that happen, and I'm now building up little injuries in my body as happens with life, I guess. But I remember the last time I got really sick, which was pretty recent, and it was not fun. But I very distinctly, in the moment, thought, like, you wouldn't believe the promises I was making to God and man to make this go away. You know what I mean? This acute pain or whatever. So then you get out of that and it feels like, that was nothing. Like, it's easy to forget this. It's like a weird thing. Or like when women have babies and they, I shouldn't say.
You forget after a while.
Yeah. Why would you ever have a second?
Right.
But it obviously kind of goes away. But what I try to remember now, especially after that, is like people in these chronic pain situations where it's just day in and day out.
It's exhausting.
It's gotta be.
It's exhausting, and it takes its toll on everything. And usually if you're in that much pain, you're not sleeping. And if you're not sleeping, nothing.
Worse.
Yeah, it gets worse. It's this vicious cycle.
Yeah. So what led you into that in particular?
Yeah, well, I really think that it probably stemmed from when I was in college and I went to that massage therapy training one summer. I think it really stemmed from that. And I loved musculoskeletal work. I loved that hands-on, portion, palpation, and really doing a deep dive with diagnostics based on, physical exam and palpation. So I think that really introduced me to, something that I maybe wouldn't have gotten into otherwise. Yeah. So I knew from that I had a passion for musculoskeletal type work.
Is there some crossover between massage therapy and the musculoskeletal?
There is, and I think it has most to do with learning how to feel. So learning how to palpate, and that takes years and years to develop.
I don't know what that means. What do you mean?
Like to hands-on. So feeling with your hands.
Oh, okay.
If you can feel dysfunction with your fingertips. And that's something that it just takes a very long time to develop. So having had years of that prior to any kind of formal training in regenerative medicine, I think has been invaluable, really.
Yeah.
I've told my husband a few times that, if I ever lost my eyesight, it would be fine. I could still work because I have my hands and I can feel it. I could do it blindfolded.
You should start doing that. People really,
I don't know.
A little party trick. I hate to be the patient, I guess.
Right.
Before a crowd.
See if my husband will go first. We'll make him do anything.
He's going to love that.
Right. So I think that it played a huge role in my ability now, clinical ability now to be able to put my hands on someone and identify, fairly quickly, okay, this is what's going on.
Yeah.
I think in that regard, it's made a huge difference for sure. Yeah.
So I'd like to put a little summation, and you can tell me if I'm on or if I'm a little off here. So what Alpine feels like to me is a medical group, a group of practitioners, people that are improving how healthcare is being given to patients with the explicit goal of actually making people better, which
absolutely.
It seems like that should go without need to be said. But I think we have to be honest that profit is always a concern, and you can't shy away from that, where in a lot of these medical establishments, you do feel like a number, and that number is the dollar sign or the insurance that's going to bring the dollar sign to you, of course. You do need money, obviously. Yeah. So that's anyone would know that for any business to keep going. But people actually getting better and doing it in a way that people don't feel like a piece of garbage, I guess, when they get through the process.
Well, right. Yeah. That's exactly it. And, we offer so many, treatments, therapies for people, so they can come to one location. They can have their child seen on the same day. If they need a well exam, they can get, a vitamin D injection. They can get their pain treated. They can have OMM, they can have their hormones evaluated. We have all of these services so people can get, unless they need specialist type care, they can get everything done under one roof. And really get well.
Yeah. So where do you see, with that being the base, and you're obviously expanding towards that, where do you see the future of Alpine? Just continue to grow that?
Yeah. I see a lot of growth in our future, just based on the growth that we've had, since we've opened. We're going to continue to expand and move into new space and bring on more providers and, do as much as we can. As long as there's this huge influx of new patients, we'll just continue to grow to match that. So.
Yeah, it seems like it'd be hard to, I don't know, I guess maybe you could get to a point where you're like, we're big enough, but I think you've got something that a lot of people really need and want.
I really think so too. And it's interesting. My husband and I have conversations about this weekly, at least. It's hard to stop and say, no, we're done growing, because there's this need. And we know there's need because of how fast it's grown. If it started fizzling out and we weren't growing at the rate we were before, well, maybe it's time to slow down. But, knowing that Fairbanks has such a deep need, we kind of have to. It's not like we can just say, okay, well, we're done. We're not going to do that anymore,
Right.
So,
And I think it's an important business principle as well that a lot of people forget. Like we've been speaking about your life and how you've come to this point where this is what you want to do and what you feel needs to be done. But also there's this other side of do people actually want this thing? Yeah. And it's very obvious with this in particular, but there's so many people that want to start, I don't know, restaurant seems to be the big thing. People are like, I'd love to own my own restaurant. Yeah. And then it fizzles out and dies or whatever, sadly. And it's like, maybe we didn't need another restaurant in that spot. You know what I mean? So it's pretty great that you were able to mesh together something that not that just people want, like you have something that really is necessary in the community. Yeah. And it speaks to you as well, in growing that from your own personal side. So wonderful.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's been so incredibly humbling and amazing to see all of these people trusting in us, that they bring their families to be treated there. Yeah. And, it's been incredible. Wonderful. It's been a wonderful journey.
Yeah. Have I missed any questions? Anything you want to add?
I don't think so. I think that was very thorough.
Good, folks. Yeah. I do get a lot of comments like, hey, you should have asked this thing. I was like, all right, well, we'll bring a certain guest back for FAQs, I guess.
I can't think of anything. That was very thorough.
Awesome. So, well, thank you so much for coming on. It was great.
Thanks for having me. This was a lot of fun.
All right. I'll see you.
See ya.
Hey there. Thank you so much for listening. If you want more content from AK Blake, you can find me on YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram, all under the handles AK Blake. Or if you want to listen to more podcasts, anywhere you get your podcasts, it's there, Fairbanks year-round. You may or may not know, I am a local real estate agent here in Fairbanks with the Summit Realty Group. So if you like what I'm doing and you want to move to the area, you already live in the area, or you're looking to invest further into real estate in the area, you can reach me. Probably the best will be either my website, akblake.com, my email, blake@akblake.com, or my phone number is probably the fastest, 907-651-8356. You can call or text. Thank you so much, and I'll see you on the next one.